"Mrs. Peterson doesn't own this land," Robert interrupted, his patience evaporating. "I do. Stop work immediately." That afternoon, Robert found his fence cut in 3 new places. Through one gap, he spotted a group of women in expensive athleisure wear setting up mats for what appeared to be a wine and yoga session. When he approached them, a blonde woman with perfect teeth gave him a dismissive wave. "It's fine. We do this every Wednesday. The HOA handles all the permissions." "I own this land," Robert said, "and I haven't given permission to anyone." Her smile vanished. "Do you know who my husband is? He's on the city council. We paid premium prices for creek access, and we're going to use it." As Robert watched them defiantly uncork their first bottle of rosé on his land, he realized this wasn't just about trespassing. This was about entitlement, power, and money. And the Whispering Pines HOA had declared open season on his inheritance. Robert's initial strategy was reasonable but firm. He installed private property signs along the boundary with Whispering Pines. Within 24 hours, every sign had been removed. He sent a certified letter to the HOA board proposing scheduled, limited access through a single entry point in exchange for a formal acknowledgement of his property rights and liability insurance. Their response came 3 days later in the form of an anonymous complaint to County Animal Control about unsanitary livestock conditions that prompted a surprise inspection. "Someone's got it out for you," the inspector admitted after finding nothing amiss. "This is the 3rd complaint this week." The situation escalated daily. Robert's mailbox was demolished by what security cameras revealed to be a Mercedes SUV with covered plates. His cattle gate was found open twice, allowing several valuable animals to wander dangerously close to the highway. Then came the psychological warfare. Flyers appeared throughout Whispering Pines depicting Robert as a greedy outsider, tech millionaire blocks children's access to nature. The irony that he'd taken an unpaid leave to preserve the ranch was apparently lost on them. The final blow came in the form of legal papers. The HOA had filed for a prescriptive easement, a legal claim that would grant them permanent access rights to significant portions of his property based on historical use. "They're trying to take your land through the back door," his attorney explained during an emergency meeting. "And they hired Craven and Buck, the most aggressive real estate firm in the state." That night, Robert found Diane Peterson and 3 board members entertaining a group of residents on his property, a catered affair with white tablecloths set up along his creek. When he approached, Diane raised her wine glass in mock toast. "We're just enjoying the community amenities, Mr. Mackenzie. Perhaps you should join us instead of fighting the inevitable. Our offer to purchase the 10 acres surrounding the creek still stands." As Robert walked away, their laughter carrying across his family's land, he made his decision. If the HOA wanted to play dirty, he would have to get creative, and he knew exactly how to do it. Robert's background in security systems proved unexpectedly valuable. After consulting with both his attorney and a livestock management expert, he developed a multi-layered strategy that was completely legal yet effectively unstoppable. First came the documentation. Trail cameras with night vision and motion activation were installed throughout the property, capturing clear evidence of trespassing, vandalism, and the HOA's organized events on his land. Next, he commissioned an official survey, marking every corner of his property with concrete markers that would make boundary disputes undeniable. The survey confirmed what he already knew. The HOA had systematically encouraged encroachment on nearly 7 acres of his land. Then came the masterstroke. Over a single weekend, while the Whispering Pines community was distracted by their annual golf tournament, Robert and a team of workers installed state-of-the-art electric fencing along the entire boundary with the development. The fencing was disguised as ordinary ranch fencing, but delivered a memorable 7,000-volt shock, harmless but intensely uncomfortable, to anyone attempting to cross. Large warning signs were posted every 50 feet. "Danger. Electric FENC. High voltage. No TOEXPASANG." At the single legal access point to his property, Robert installed a heavy-duty cattle gate with a sophisticated keypad entry system, the same technology he had designed for tech companies to secure their campuses. The system could log every entry, restrict access to approved individuals, and even time-limit visits. The results were immediate and glorious. That very Sunday afternoon, security cameras captured the moment when the Wilderness Wine and Yoga group attempted their weekly trespass. The shocked expressions, literally, as the first two women grabbed the fence were priceless. Their indignant retreat was followed by 3 separate calls to the sheriff's department. When Sheriff Martinez arrived, Robert calmly showed him the property survey, the documentation of trespassing, and the permits for his livestock protection fencing. "Looks like you've done your homework," the sheriff admitted. "Electric fencing for livestock protection is perfectly legal in this county." The next HOA meeting became a shouting match, with Diane Peterson promising legal action. But their options had suddenly become limited. The prescriptive easement claim was severely weakened by Robert's immediate and definitive response to the encroachment. Their complaints about the fence fell flat when county officials confirmed it complied with all regulations for agricultural properties. The final blow to the HOA's campaign came from an unexpected source. Local news picked up the story, and public opinion swung decisively in Robert's favor when he released security footage of Diane's trespassing dinner party and her explicit statement about trying to force him to sell his land. 6 months later, a chastened HOA board, minus Diane Peterson, who had abruptly resigned, approached Robert with a legitimate proposal. The new president, a retired judge who had opposed Diane's tactics, offered a formal, limited-access agreement that Robert could actually accept. Guided nature walks along a designated trail, twice monthly, with proper insurance, formal acknowledgement of his property rights, and an annual access fee that would help maintain the land. As he watched the first authorized group of visitors respectfully follow the trail guide, Robert reflected on what his grandfather would think. The old man would probably be horrified at allowing any access at all, but might appreciate the irony that the electric fence he had always threatened to install had finally become reality. That evening, as the sun set over his land, secure, protected, and undeniably his, Robert raised a glass of his grandfather's favorite whiskey and toast. Sometimes, he murmured to himself, "You have to shock entitled people back to reality." Robert Mackenzie had never planned on becoming a rancher. As a software engineer in his late 30s, he was perfectly content with his downtown loft and his 6-figure salary designing security systems. But when his grandfather passed away and left him the 15-acre ranch that had been in their family for 3 generations, everything changed with a single phone call. "Mr. Mackenzie, I'm sorry to inform you that your grandfather has passed." The lawyer's voice had a practiced solemnity. "But there's something else. He left you the entire ranch, livestock and all." The property was a slice of heaven tucked away at the edge of rapidly expanding Pine Creek, rolling hills embraced by ancient oak trees, a crystal-clear creek that babbled across the land, and enough space for the 30 head of prized Angus cattle his grandfather had raised to award-winning status. It was worth millions to developers, but priceless to the Mackenzie family. Robert arrived to find the ranch in a state of neglect. His grandfather's declining health had been kept secret from him. Determined to honor his legacy, Robert shocked his tech colleagues by taking an extended leave of absence. "I need to get my hands dirty for once," he told them. Within weeks, Robert had transformed from a man who couldn't change a tire to someone who could mend fences at dawn, tend to a sick calf by midday, and still troubleshoot code by nightfall. The neighboring ranchers, initially skeptical of the city slicker, began to respect his dedication. Old Man Jenkins even invited him to Sunday dinner, something unheard of for outsiders. Robert was beginning to feel like he belonged when the black Tesla Model X pulled up his dusty driveway. A woman with perfectly highlighted hair and a designer pantsuit emerged, looking comically out of place against the rustic backdrop. "Mr. Mackenzie? I'm Diane Peterson, president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "We need to discuss some irregularities regarding your property boundaries." Little did Robert know that this pristine-looking woman was about to declare war on his inheritance and his newfound purpose. The meeting with Diane Peterson left Robert unsettled. After she departed with promises to be in touch, soon with documentation, he walked the property line she had disputably pointed out on a glossy map. Something didn't add up. According to her, nearly a third of his eastern pasture somehow belonged to the community spaces of Whispering Pines. That evening, Robert called his cousin Sarah, who had grown up visiting the ranch every summer alongside him. "Grandpa giving away land. That's ridiculous," Sarah laughed. "Remember when he caught those hikers crossing the creek? He followed them on horseback all the way to the county road, lecturing them about property rights the entire time." The memory made Robert smile. His grandfather had been stubborn and territorial, but fair. He'd allowed responsible fishermen to use the creek occasionally, but always with explicit permission and always with respect for the land. The next morning, Robert drove into town to visit the county records office. The clerk, a gray-haired woman named Margaret, brightened when he mentioned his grandfather's name. Jack Mackenzie. Lord, that man was particular about his boundaries. He was in here every 5 years like clockwork to review his property maps and make sure nothing had changed. Last time was just before that fancy development went in. Margaret pulled the official survey records, yellowed with age, but meticulously maintained. The boundary lines were crystal clear, and exactly where Robert thought they were. No easements, no shared access points, no community agreements were recorded. "Your grandfather fought that developer tooth and nail," Margaret confided as she made him copies. "They wanted to route their drainage through your creek. Jack wouldn't hear of it, said it would affect his cattle's water quality." Armed with the official records, Robert spent the afternoon walking his eastern fence line. There he found something disturbing: sections where the fence had been deliberately cut and then loosely reattached with baling wire. In 3 separate locations, well-worn footpaths led from these compromised boundaries straight toward the creek. As the sun set over the hills his family had stewarded for generations, Robert realized he wasn't just fighting for property lines. He was defending his grandfather's legacy against those who would chip away at it through entitlement and deception. His phone pinged with an email from Diane Peterson. Subject line: Whispering Pines Community Creek Access Schedule, Spring/Summer. Attached was a calendar of planned events on his land, without a single mention of permission or acknowledgement of ownership. The battle lines were being drawn, whether he wanted war or not. The HOA's claims were as audacious as they were infuriating. According to Diane, the luxury development of Whispering Pines, where homes started at $1.2 million, had an established understanding with Robert's grandfather. "You see," Diane explained, sliding a glossy brochure across his weathered kitchen table, "our marketing materials specifically advertise exclusive access to natural creek lands. Your grandfather verbally agreed to this 5 years ago." The brochure showed smiling families picnicking by his creek, children playing under his oak trees, and yoga classes stretching in his east meadow. None of these people had ever asked permission or acknowledged they were on private property. "My grandfather kept every receipt since 1972, including one for a pack of gum he bought in 1986, Robert counted. If there was an agreement, he would have documented it. Diane's smile tightened. Perhaps his memory was failing in his final years. Regardless, our residents have established usage rights through continued access. We expect this arrangement to continue. After she left, Robert called his grandfather's best friend, Harvey, who laughed so hard he started coughing. "Your grandpa ran an open ranch. Hell, son, he once chased the county surveyor off with a shotgun for stepping 6 inches over the property line." The next morning, Robert discovered the true extent of the encroachment when he followed fresh tire tracks to find a construction crew installing a wooden footbridge across his creek. The foreman cheerfully explained they were upgrading community amenities. "This isn't community land," Robert stated firmly. "This is private property, my property." The crew looked confused, but Mrs. Peterson said,